Hi everybody, welcome to CMN103 Introduction to Creative Industries. I'm Gail Crimmins and today I'm going to be talking to you about presentation skills. I think it's really important when you think about task 2 that you consider that it doesn't matter how amazing your content is, it doesn't matter how amazing and fantastic you have designed a product or a service that people need in the creative industries or that are based in the creative industries, if people don't know about it. So you've really got to be able to tell your story, you've got to be able to pitch it in a way that's really interesting. And the really important thing about that is that the way you physically present what you say has an impact on whether or not your audience becomes interested in what you say. So if I stand here and I look disinterested, and I'll show you physically how I do that. I look disinterested when I put my weight onto one hip, when I slouch, when I let my shoulders roll down, or if I put my hands in my pocket. I actually start to look as if I don't really care about what I'm talking about. And if I don't care what I'm talking about, why should you? If I don't really feel passionate and energized about my product or my service, why should you? So it's just as important to think about how you physically present and how you vocally present your pitch as it is to think about the content of your pitch. Good presenting is about entertaining as well as conveying information. So you have to entertain, you have to engage an audience, you have to make yourself listenable, you have to make your product interesting or your service exciting. You need to entertain the audience. People retain more if they're enjoying themselves and feeling relaxed. So, whatever your subject and audience, try to find ways to make your audience connect with and feel relaxed and interested in what you have to say. What do you need to do to be entertaining? Well, you need to use your imagination. If you're good at humour, use humour, but if you're not, please don't. You have to think about what the audience enjoys. Now, you're in this really privileged position because you know your tutorial mates already. You've talked together, you've done group work together, you've had class discussions, etc. Think about what they're interested in. Think about their cultural ideas. Think about the things that they watch, they listen to, that you can use in your pitch to entertain them. So enjoyment and humour are mostly in the preparation. So you don't necessarily need to be, present something off the cuff. You can present and rehearse it beforehand. And these effects are really are rarely produced spontaneously. So you really do need to think beforehand about what humour you're going to bring into the presentation. You don't need to be a natural stand-up comic, and most of you aren't, so please don't try to be. But really start to think about what are going to make your audience smile, what is going to be recognisable to them. And I want to show a clip with you actually, and it's quite a lengthy clip. There are two main reasons that I want to show it to you. The first is because the presenter, Sir Ken Robertson, introduces humour to every single part of his presentation. He tells little stories, little anecdotes. He sounds very naturally comedic. But don't let that fool you because he is very well rehearsed and very well prepared and he has prepared this speech. But he does so with humour and in a very relaxed way. So that's one thing. The other thing that the presenter, Ken, does is he uses information and anecdote and story that connects with his audience. He knows his audience really well. He knows what they're interested in. He knows what they know already because he's shared this conference space with them. And so he's able to reuse those things. So don't forget about what you know about your classmates and your tutorial group as well. But the second reason that I'd like to share this with you is because the subject matter is creativity in education. And so I think that it's really important for us to remember why we're involved in the creative industries, the power of creativity and the importance of creativity for our future. The future is unknown and we know that we need to be adaptable, we know that we need to be creative to be able to navigate successfully through the future. So just watch this clip and then I'm going to talk a little bit about it in terms of his presentation technique.
Good morning. How are you? It's been great, hasn't it? I've been blown away by the whole thing. In fact, I'm leaving. There have been 3 themes, haven't there, running through the conference. which are relevant to what I want to talk about. One is the extraordinary evidence of human creativity in all of the presentations that we've had and in all the people here. Just the variety of it and the range of it. The second is that it's put us in a place where we have no idea what's going to happen in terms of the future. No idea how this may play out. I have an interest in education. Actually, what I find is everybody has an interest in education. Don't you? I find this very interesting. If you're at a dinner party and you say you work in education, actually, you're not often at dinner parties, frankly, if you work in education. You're not asked, and you're never asked back, curiously. That's I think that strikes me. But if you are, and you say to somebody, they say, what do you do? And you say, you work in education, you can see the blood run from their face. They think, oh my God, why me? It's my one night out all week. But if you ask people about their education, they pin you to the wall. Because it's one of those things that goes deep with people. Am I right? Like religion and money and other things. So I have a big interest in education, and I think we all do. We have a huge vested interest in it, partly because it's education that's meant to take us into this future that we can't grasp. If you think of it, children starting school this year will be retiring in 2065. Nobody has a clue, despite all the expertise that's been on parade for the past 4 days, what the world will look like in 5 years' time. And yet we're meant to be educating them for it. So the unpredictability, I think, is extraordinary. And the third part of this is that we've all agreed, nonetheless, on the really extraordinary capacities that children have, their capacities for innovation. I mean, Serena last night was a marvel, wasn't she? Just seeing what she could do. And she's exceptional, but I think she's not, so to speak, exceptional in the whole of childhood. What you have there is a person of extraordinary dedication who found a talent. And my contention is all kids have tremendous talents, and we squander them pretty ruthlessly. So I want to talk about education, and I want to talk about creativity. My contention is that creativity now is as important in education as literacy, and we should treat it with the same status. Thank you. That was it, by the way. Thank you very much. So, 15 minutes left. Well, I was born... No, I had a great story recently, I love telling it, of a little girl who was in a drawing lesson. She was 6, and she was at the back drawing, and the teacher said, this little girl hardly ever paid attention. And in this drawing lesson, she did. And the teacher was fascinated. She went over to her and she said, what are you drawing? And the girl said, I'm drawing a picture of God. And the teacher said, but nobody knows what God looks like. And the girl said, they will in a minute. When my son was 4 in England, actually he was 4 everywhere, to be honest. I mean, if we're being strict about it, wherever he went, he was 4 that year. But he was in the Nativity play. Do you remember the story? No, it was big. It was a big story. Mel Gibson did the sequel. You may have seen it. I don't know. It was Nativity 2. But James got the part of Joseph, which we were thrilled about. We consider this to be one of the lead parts. We had the place crammed full of agents and T-shirts, James Robinson is Joseph. He didn't have to speak, but do you know the bit where the 3 kings come in? They come in bearing gifts, and they bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh. This really happened. We're sitting there, and they, I think, just went out of sequence. Because we talked to the little boy afterwards and said, are you okay with that? And they said, yeah, why was that wrong? They just switched. I think that was it. Anyway, the 3 boys came in, little 4-year-olds with tea towels on their heads, and they put these boxes down. The first boy said, I bring you gold. And the second boy said, I bring you myrrh. And the third boy said, Frank sent this. What these things have in common, you see, is that kids will take a chance. If they don't know, they'll have a go. Am I right? They're not frightened of being wrong. Now, I don't mean to say that being wrong is the same thing as being creative. What we do know is, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. If you're not prepared to be wrong. And by the time they get to be adults, most kids have lost that capacity. They have become frightened of being wrong. And we run our companies this, by the way. We stigmatize mistakes. And we're now running national education systems where mistakes are the worst thing you can make. And the result is that we are educating people out of their creative capacities. Picasso once said this. He said that all children are born artists. The problem is to remain an artist as we grow up. I believe this passionately, that we don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it. Or rather, we get educated out of it. So why is this? I lived in Stratford-on-Avon until about 5 years ago. In fact, we moved from Stratford to Los Angeles. So you can imagine what a seamless transition, this was from LA. Actually, we lived in a place called Snitterfield, just outside Stratford, which is where Shakespeare's father was born. Are you struck by a new thought? I was. You don't think of Shakespeare having a father, do you? Do you? Because you don't think of Shakespeare being a child. Do you? Shakespeare being 7. I never thought of it. I mean, he was 7 at some point. He was in somebody's English class, wasn't he? Do you understand? Really? How annoying would that be? Must try harder. Being sent to bed by his dad, to Shakespeare, go to bed now, to William Shakespeare, and put the pencil down, and stop speaking like that. It's confusing everybody. Anyway, we moved from Stratford to Los Angeles, and I just want to say a word about the transition. Actually, my son didn't want to come. I've got 2 kids. He's 21 now, and my daughter's 16. He didn't want to come to Los Angeles. He loved it, but he had a girlfriend in England. This was the love of his life, Sarah. He'd known her for a month. Mind you, they'd had their 4th anniversary by then, because it's a long time when you're 16. Anyway, he was really upset on the plane. He said, "I'll never find another girl like Sarah." And we were rather pleased about that, frankly, because she was the main reason we were leaving the country. But something strikes you when you move to America and when you travel around the world. Every education system on Earth has the same hierarchy of subjects. Everyone, doesn't matter where you go. You think it would be otherwise, but it isn't. At the top are mathematics and languages, then the humanities, and at the bottom are the arts, everywhere on Earth. And in pretty much every system, too, there's a hierarchy within the arts. Art and music are normally given a higher status in schools than drama and dance. There isn't an education system on the planet that teaches dance every day to children the way we teach them mathematics. Why? Why not? I think this is rather important. I think maths is very important, but so is dance. Children dance all the time if they're allowed to. We all do. We all have bodies, don't we? Did I miss a meeting? I mean, I think... Truthfully, what happens is, as children grow up, we start to educate them progressively from the waist up. And then we focus on their heads, and slightly to one side. If you were to visit education as an alien and say, what's it for, public education, I think you'd have to conclude, if you look at the output, who really succeeds by this? Who does everything they should? Who gets all the brownie points? Who are the winners? I think you'd have to conclude the whole purpose of public education throughout the world is to produce university professors. Isn't it? They're the people who come out the top. And I used to be one. So there. And I like university professors, but, we shouldn't hold them up as the high watermark of all human achievement. They're just a form of life. Another form of life. But they're rather curious, and I say this out of affection for them. There's something curious about professors. In my experience, not all of them, but typically, they live in their heads. They live up there, and slightly to one side. They're disembodied, in a kind of literal way. They look upon their body as a form of transport for their heads. It's... Don't they? It's a way of getting their head to meetings. if you want real evidence of out-of-body experiences, by the way, get yourself along to a residential conference for senior academics and pop into the discotheque on the final night. And there you will see it. Grown men and women writhing uncontrollably off the beat. Waiting till it ends so they can go home and write a paper about it. Now, our education system is predicated on the idea of academic ability. And there's a reason. The whole system was invented around the world. There were no public systems of education really before the 19th century. They all came into being to meet the needs of industrialism. So the hierarchy is rooted on two ideas. Number one, that the most useful subjects for work are at the top. So you were probably steered benignly away from things at school when you were a kid, things you liked, on the grounds you would never get a job doing that. Is that right? Don't do music, you're not going to be a musician. Don't do art, you won't be an artist. Benign advice, now profoundly mistaken. The whole world is engulfed in a revolution. And the second is academic ability, which has really come to dominate our view of intelligence because the universities designed the system in their image. If you think of it, the whole system of public education around the world is a protracted process of university entrance. And the consequence is that many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not, because the thing they were good at school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized. And I think we can't afford to go on that way.
Okay, so what did you think? Did you enjoy it? I have to say, and it's really worthwhile watching the whole thing. I know you only managed to watch a small section in that time, so maybe when you've got all your assessments out the way, or you find a spare half an hour somewhere, you might want to watch the whole thing, because it's incredibly informative, incredibly moving, but also very funny. So what did you like about it? I particularly liked his jokes and his use of humour, like I mentioned a bit earlier. I liked the way that he connected with his audience. And I like the fact that he did actually make some really very serious points about the importance of creativity, about the way that schools squander the talents of our young children. But he did so in a very engaging, narrative way. So we remember the stories, we're going to remember the ideas. Don't forget the importance of stories in your presentations. We'll remember through stories. Tell us anecdotes, tell us stories, set up scenarios, give us role plays. So these are really important kind of techniques to think about in terms of how and why you present in a certain way. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but also something intriguing about Sir Ken Robertson is that he's physically quite still, certainly in terms of his lower body. And that's because when he was a child he had polio, and so he's quite disabled. It takes quite a long time to walk, and he's not as agile physically as perhaps other people might be. But he's very agile with his eyes and his smile. He smiles readily. Please be aware that when you smile as a presenter, your audience will smile. It's really important. If you want them to feel good about something, you've got to smile. You've got to genuinely feel good about it yourself. If you want them to feel really bad about something, that something's really bad, you frown, you shake your head back and forth. If you want them to agree with you, then you nod. So, remember when you're presenting at what point you want them to agree with you, at what point you want them to disagree with something, at what point you want them to think about something. You might tilt your head to one side. So these non-verbal communication skills indicate to the audience how you want them to respond, what you want them to do, or how you want them to feel. You've got to model the behaviour that you want from your audience. If you want your audience to be interested, you have to be interested. If you want them to be really enthusiastic about something, you've got to be enthusiastic. If you want them to like you, you've got to like them. So I just want you to think about that first image that you have in your slides this week is just a small frame of Barack Obama, and he's presenting. And I think it's really a useful thing to do as well, is to have a look at some of his most famous kind of speeches and what techniques he uses. I don't know if you've noticed, but one of the first things he does, and he was the first US president to do this, he rolled up his sleeves. It's quite an innocuous gesture, isn't it? That looks quite everyday, and that's the whole point. He looked more everyday, more like the average, US citizen on the street than somebody who was completely suited and booted and looked in a suit that didn't resemble the everyday worker, the everyday person. But the rolling of the sleeve is not incidental. He has amazing advisors. And so it wasn't just that he felt like doing it himself. He would have been advised to do that. And there's another reason why he was advised to do that as well. And that's because when you show somebody your wrists, you're saying to them, you can trust me. Now, if there's one thing that a politician needs, it's the belief in the audience and their trust of the audience. So by saying, you can trust me, he was gaining their trust. He uses a lot of these gestures as well, these kind of back and forth, you and me gestures. He uses the word we a lot, and us and our. We believe in this, and this our country, and this our solution. And he does a lot of nodding. And all of these things make the audience feel that they are part of his group, that they agree, that they're part of the same group of people, the same ideas, etc. So these are techniques that you can use. You can roll up your sleeves. You can say, look, you can trust me. You can use we and us gestures. You can use back and forth movement like this that creates that relationship. Don't ignore the potential of your arms and your hands and your head to communicate these things. They're really important. I'm just going to show you as well, if you go back to that second slide. So in the first slide, it's actually the third slide. So in the first slide, we've got a slide of Barack Obama. In the second slide, we've got some of those words that's really important about why you need to entertain and not just inform. And on the third slide, we've got Sir Ken Robinson using that beautiful open gesture, which I'm going to talk to you about in relation to the fourth slide. So let's have a little look at that fourth slide. What can you see there? You've got two people standing next to each other. The first person is standing upright. He's got his hands at his waist. He's got a wide stance. His chest is open. His throat is exposed. His chest is exposed. And he looks very confident, overconfident perhaps. Well, juxtaposed to that is a position of vulnerability, where you've got somebody who is literally folding into themselves. They're apologising for their presence. They're saying, don't look at me. And guess what? If you say, don't look at me with your body, the audience will look away. They'll look somewhere else. If you read most newspaper headlines, you'd imagine that the world is full of really awful people, that nobody cares for anybody, that there's no empathy, that the world is a really awful, cruel place. But in my lived experience, that's not the case. Most people, like you at home, are really nice. Just genuinely nice person. You wouldn't go out of your way to harm somebody. So when you think that looking at that person, by staring at them, you'll inflict some harm upon them, you look away. What do I mean by that? Let's break this down. Let's look at these points of vulnerability. If somebody looks really, really vulnerable and they tell you with their body that they don't want to be looked at, you will look away. And this is how they tell you. They tell you by putting their toes together or by standing on one foot. They tell you by covering their wrists. They might do it by covering them with a jumper or a cardigan, by putting them in their pockets. They might cover their chest, their throat, and this area here, their solar plexus. They'll cover their throat with their chin, and they'll enfold and make themselves look as small as possible. And they're saying, don't look at me. I feel vulnerable. And so we look away. And guess what? When we look away, our thoughts go somewhere else. Our awareness goes somewhere else. So you've lost your audience without even realising it. By exposing your vulnerability to presenting, you've said to the audience, don't look at me, so they've looked away. You've said to them, don't listen to me, so they've stopped listening to you. So all of that amazing work that you did with your group, developing a concept, finding a gap, doing your market research, that's all wasted because you've said to the audience physically, I don't want you to look at me. But the reverse is true as well. So if you stand upright and you show your wrists and you open your chest and your throat and you say, I've got something really special, amazing, exciting, this is going to really help you, and you do a bit of nodding when you talk about things that you like and a bit of frowning, and they're going to be with you. They're going to share the story, they're going to share your enthusiasm, they're going to share your joy. So really think about your physicality. And the other thing, that this particular slide that I've been talking about is called points of vulnerability. And it relates to the fact that when we are under attack physically, But we're animals, as the part of the animal kingdom, and this happens to all animals, whether it's humans or otherwise. When we are under attack, when animals are under attack, we cover our body. When we are physically under attack, we cover our body because there are certain points within the body where we could actually lose our life, because we would lose so much blood, or our organs would be exposed in terms of that attack. So without even consciously doing so, when we feel psychologically under attack, we cover those points of vulnerability. So we cover the genitalia, we cover this area here, which is the solar plexus, which is your emotional energy store. We actually cover our chest, we cover our wrists and our throat, and we do so by turning our body in the way that I showed you earlier. You're saying, I'm under attack, you're feeling under attack, and so the audience doesn't want to engage you in any more kind of pain, and so they look away. So really make sure that you're aware of what your body's doing, and make sure that you're upright, that you're confident, and that you enjoy presenting, because then your audience will enjoy it. I want to talk to you a little bit as well about your voice, because your voice is more important than the words. Now, these elements of voice, if you like, paralinguistics, as you'll have discussed in Core 109, the pitch, the pace, the tone of your voice, they communicate the meaning. So the words themselves have no meaning. If I said, stop it, do I mean it? Yeah, I mean stop it. But if I said the same word differently, I might mean something different. So let's have a think about it. What do I mean if I say, stop it? Do I mean it? No. I want you to carry on. So it's the way in which you use the words, the paralinguistics, the paralanguage around that, much more important than the actual words themselves. So think about your pitch, your pace, your tone. Think about the really important words. If you've got a catchphrase, if you've got something that you want the audience to remember, make sure there's a pause before it and a pause after it, because that will prepare the audience to listen to those words, and it'll allow the audience to assimilate and really reflect on and engage those words. So there's got to be pause between the main ideas. You can't just speak as if they're all the words of the same weight, the same meaning, because we switch off. Okay, so think about the words as well. The last thing that I want you to think about is the fact that this non-verbal communication not only changes your audience in terms of the way that they engage with you as a presenter, but it actually can change you and how confident you are as a presenter.
So I want to start by offering you a free, no-tech life hack. And all it requires of you is this, that you change your posture for 2 minutes. But before I give it away, I want to ask you to right now do a little audit of your body and what you're doing with your body. So how many of you are sort of making yourselves smaller? Maybe you're hunching, crossing your legs, maybe wrapping your ankles. Sometimes we hold on to our arms like this. Sometimes we spread out. I see you. So I want you to pay attention to what you're doing right now. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes, and I'm hoping that if you sort of learn to tweak this a little bit, it could significantly change the way your life unfolds. So we're really fascinated with body language, and we're particularly interested in other people's body language. You know, we're interested in, like, you know, an awkward interaction, or a smile, or a contemptuous glance, or maybe a very awkward wink, or maybe even something like a handshake.
Here they are arriving at number 10, and look at this lucky policeman gets to shake hands with the President of the United States. Oh, and here comes the Prime Minister of it. No.
So a handshake, or the lack of a handshake, can have us talking for weeks and weeks and weeks, even the BBC and the New York Times. So obviously, when we think about nonverbal behavior or body language, but we call it nonverbals as social scientists, it's language. So we think about communication. When we think about communication, we think about interactions. So what is your body language communicating to me? What's mine communicating to you? And there's a lot of reason to believe that this is a valid way to look at this. So social scientists have spent a lot of time looking at the effects of our body language or other people's body language on judgments. And we make sweeping judgments and inferences from body language. And those judgments can predict really meaningful life outcomes, like who we hire or promote, who we ask out on a date. For example, Nalini Ambady, a researcher at Tufts University, shows that when people watch 30-second soundless clips of real physician-patient interactions, their judgments of the physician's niceness predict whether or not that physician will be sued. So it doesn't have to do so much with whether or not that physician was incompetent, but do we like that person and how they interacted? Even more dramatic, Alex Todorov at Princeton has shown us that judgments of political candidates' faces in just 1 second predict 70% of US Senate and gubernatorial race outcomes. And even, let's go digital, emoticons used well in online negotiations can lead you to claim more value from that negotiation. If you use them poorly, bad idea, right? So when we think of nonverbals, we think of how we judge others, how they judge us, and what the outcomes are. We tend to forget, though, the other audience that's influenced by our nonverbals, and that's ourselves. We are also influenced by our nonverbals, our thoughts and our feelings and our physiology. So what nonverbals am I talking about? I'm a social psychologist, I study prejudice, and I teach at a competitive business school. So it was inevitable that I would become interested in power dynamics. I became especially interested in nonverbal expressions of power and dominance. And what are nonverbal expressions of power and dominance? Well, this is what they are. So in the animal kingdom, they are about expanding. So you make yourself big, you stretch out, you take up space, you're basically opening up. It's about opening up. And this is true across the animal kingdom. It's not just limited to primates, and humans do the same thing. So they do this both when they have power sort of chronically, and also when they're feeling powerful in the moment. And this one is especially interesting because it really shows us how universal and old these expressions of power are. This expression, which is known as pride, Jessica Tracy has studied, she shows that people who are born with sight and people who are congenitally blind do this when they win at a physical competition. So when they cross the finish line and they've won, it doesn't matter if they've never seen anyone do it, they do this. So the arms up in the V, the chin is slightly lifted. What do we do when we feel powerless? We do exactly the opposite. We close up, we wrap ourselves up, we make ourselves small. We don't want to bump into the person next to us. So again, both animals and humans do the same thing. And this is what happens when you put together high and low power. So what we tend to do when it comes to power is that we complement the other's nonverbals. So if someone's being really powerful with us, we tend to make ourselves smaller. We don't mirror them, we do the opposite of them. So I'm watching this behavior in the classroom, and what do I notice? I notice that MBA students really exhibit the full range of power nonverbals. So you have people who are like caricatures of alphas, like really coming into the room, they get right into the middle of the room before class even starts, like they really want to occupy space. When they sit down, they're sort of spread out, they raise their hands like this. You have other people who are virtually collapsing when they come in. As soon as they come in, you see it. You see it on their faces and their bodies, and they sit in their chair and they make themselves tiny, and they go like this when they raise their hand. I noticed a couple things about this. One, you're not going to be surprised, it seems to be related to gender. So women are much more likely to do this kind of thing than men. Women feel chronically less powerful than men, so this is not surprising. But the other thing I noticed is that it also seemed to be related to the extent to which the students were participating and how well they were participating. And this is really important in the MBA classroom because participation counts for half the grade. So business schools have been struggling with this gender grade gap. You get these equally qualified women and men coming in, And then you get these differences in grades, and it seems to be partly attributable to participation. So I started to wonder, okay, so you have these people coming in like this, and they're participating. Is it possible that we could get people to fake it, and would it lead them to participate more? So my main collaborator, Dana Carney, who's at Berkeley, and I really wanted to know, can you fake it till you make it? Like, can you do this just for a little while and actually experience a behavioral outcome that makes you seem more powerful? So we know that our nonverbals govern how other people think and feel about us. There's a lot of evidence, but our question really was, do our nonverbals govern how we think and feel about ourselves? There's some evidence that they do. So, for example, when we smile when we feel happy, but also when we're forced to smile by holding a pen in our teeth like this, it makes us feel happy. So it goes both ways. When it comes to power, it also goes both ways. So when you feel powerful, you're more likely to do this, but it's also possible that when you pretend to be powerful, you are more likely to actually feel powerful. So the second question really was, so we know that our minds change our bodies, but is it also true that our bodies change our minds? And when I say minds, in the case of the powerful, what am I talking about? So I'm talking about thoughts and feelings and the sort of physiological things that make up our thoughts and feelings, and in my case, that's hormones. I look at hormones. So what do the minds of the powerful versus the powerless look like? So powerful people tend to be, not surprisingly, more assertive and more confident, more optimistic. They actually feel that they're going to win even at games of chance. They also tend to be able to think more abstractly. So there are a lot of differences. They take more risks. There are a lot of differences between powerful and powerless people. Physiologically, there also are differences on two key hormones, testosterone, which is the dominance hormone, and cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So what we find is that high-power alpha males in primate hierarchies have high testosterone and low cortisol, and powerful and effective leaders also have high testosterone and low cortisol. So what does that mean? When you think about power, people tended to think only about testosterone because that was about dominance. But really, power is also about how you react to stress. So do you want the high-power leader that's dominant, high on testosterone, but really stress reactive? Probably not, right? You want the person who's powerful and assertive and dominant, but not very stress reactive, the person who's laid back. So we know that in primate hierarchies, if an alpha needs to take over, if an individual needs to take over an alpha role sort of suddenly, within a few days, that individual's testosterone has gone up significantly and his cortisol has dropped significantly. So we have this evidence, both that the body can shape the mind, at least at the facial level, and also that role changes can shape the mind. So what happens, okay, you take a role change, what happens if you do that at a really minimal level, like this tiny manipulation, this tiny intervention? For 2 minutes you say, I want you to stand like this, and it's going to make you feel more powerful. So this is what we did. We decided to bring people into the lab and run a little experiment, and these people adopted for 2 minutes either high power poses or low power poses. And I'm just going to show you 5 of the poses, although they took on only 2. So here's one, a couple more. This one has been dubbed the Wonder Woman by the media. Here are a couple more. So you can be standing or you can be sitting. And here are the low power poses. So you're folding up, you're making yourself small. This one is very low power. When you're touching your neck, you're really kind of protecting yourself. So this is what happens. They come in, they spit into a vial. We, for 2 minutes, say, you need to do this or this. They don't look at pictures of the poses. We don't want to prime them with the concept of power. We want them to be feeling power, right? So 2 minutes they do this. We then ask them, how powerful do you feel on a series of items? And then we give them an opportunity to gamble. And then we take another saliva sample. That's it. That's the whole experiment. So this is what we find. Risk tolerance, which is the gambling. What we find is that when you're in the high power pose condition, 86% of you will gamble. When you're in the low power pose condition, only 60%. And that's a pretty whopping significant difference. Here's what we find on testosterone. From their baseline when they come in, high power people experience about a 20% increase, and low power people experience about a 10% decrease. So again, 2 minutes and you get these changes. Here's what you get on cortisol. High power people experience about a 25% decrease, and the low power people experience about a 15% increase. So 2 minutes lead to these hormonal changes that configure your brain to basically be either assertive, confident, and comfortable, or really stress reactive, and feeling sort of shut down. And we've all had that feeling, right? So it seems that our nonverbals do govern how we think and feel about ourselves. So it's not just others, but it's also ourselves. Also, our bodies change our minds. But the next question, of course, is, can power posing for a few minutes really change your life in meaningful ways? So this is in the lab, it's this little task, it's just a couple of minutes. Where can you actually apply this, which we cared about, of course. And so we think it's really what matters, where you want to use this is evaluative situations, like social threat situations. Where are you being evaluated? Either by your friends, like for teenagers, it's at the lunchroom table. It could be, for some people, it's speaking at a school board meeting. It might be giving a pitch, or giving a talk like this, or doing a job interview. We decided that the one that most people could relate to, because most people had been through, was the job interview. So we published these findings, and the media are all over it, and they say, okay, so this is what you do when you go in for the job interview, right? So we were, of course, horrified, and said, oh my God, no, that's not what we meant at all, for numerous reasons. No, don't do that. Again, this is not about you talking to other people, it's you talking to yourself. What do you do before you go into a job interview? You do this. Right? You're sitting down, you're looking at your iPhone or your Android, not trying to leave anyone out. You're looking at your notes, you're hunching up, making yourself small, when really what you should be doing maybe is this, like in the bathroom, right? Do that, find 2 minutes. So that's what we want to test, okay? So we bring people into a lab, and they do either high or low power poses again. They go through a very stressful job interview. It's 5 minutes long. They are being recorded, they're being judged also, and the judges are trained to give no nonverbal feedback. So they look like this. Like, imagine this is the person interviewing you. So for 5 minutes, nothing. And this is worse than being heckled. People hate this. It's what Marianne LaFrance calls standing in social quicksand. So this really spikes your cortisol. So this is the job interview we put them through, because we really wanted to see what happened. We then have these coders look at these tapes, 4 of them. They're blind to the hypothesis, they're blind to the conditions. They have no idea who's been posing in what pose. And they end up looking at these sets of tapes, and they say, oh, we want to hire these people, all the high power posers. We don't want to hire these people. We also evaluate these people much more positively overall. But what's driving it? It's not about the content of the speech. It's about the presence that they're bringing to the speech. We also, because we rate them on all these variables related to sort of competence, like how well structured is the speech? How good is it? What are their qualifications? No effect on those things. This is what's affected, these kinds of things. People are bringing their true selves, basically. They're bringing themselves. They bring their ideas, but as themselves, with no residue over them. So this is what's driving the effect, or mediating the effect. So when I tell people about this, that our bodies change our minds, and our minds can change our behavior, and our behavior can change our outcomes, they say to me, it feels fake, right? So I said, fake it till you make it. Like, it's not me. Like, I don't want to get there and then still feel like a fraud. I don't want to feel like an imposter. I don't want to get there only to feel like I'm not supposed to be here. And that really resonated with me, because I want to tell you a little story about being an imposter and feeling like I'm not supposed to be here. When I was 19, I was in a really bad car accident. I was thrown out of a car, rolled several times. I was thrown from the car, and I woke up in a head injury rehab ward. And I had been withdrawn from college, and and I learned that my IQ had dropped by 2 standard deviations, which was very traumatic. I knew my IQ because I had identified with being smart, and I had been called gifted as a child. So I'm taken out of college. I keep trying to go back. They say, you're not going to finish college. Like, just, you know, there are other things for you to do, but that's not going to work out for you. So I really struggled with this. And I have to say, having your identity taken from you, your core identity, and for me it was being smart, having that taken from you, there's nothing that leaves you feeling more powerless than that. So I felt entirely powerless. I worked and worked and worked, and I got lucky and worked and got lucky and worked. Eventually, I graduated from college. It took me 4 years longer than my peers. And I convinced someone, my angel advisor, Susan Fisk, to take me on. And so I ended up at Princeton, and I was like, I am not supposed to be here. I am an imposter. And the night before my first year talk, and the first year talk at Princeton is a 20-minute talk to 20 people. That's it. I was so afraid of being found out the next day that I called her and said, I'm quitting. She was like, you are not quitting, because I took a gamble on you and you're staying. You're going to stay, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to fake it. You're going to do every talk that you ever get asked to do. You're just going to do it and do it and do it, even if you're terrified and just paralyzed and having an out-of-body experience, until you have this moment where you say, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. Like, I have become this. I am actually doing this. So that's what I did. 5 years in grad school. A few years, you know, I'm at Northwestern. I moved to Harvard. I'm at Harvard. I'm not really thinking about it anymore, but for a long time I had been thinking, not supposed to be here, not supposed to be here. So at the end of my first year at Harvard, a student who had not talked in class the entire semester, who I had said, look, you got to participate or else you're going to fail, came into my office. I really didn't know her at all. And she said, she came in totally defeated, and she said, I'm not supposed to be here. And that was the moment for me, because 2 things happened. One was that I realized, oh my gosh, I don't feel like that anymore. You know, I don't feel that anymore, but she does, and I get that feeling. And the second was, she is supposed to be here. Like, she can fake it, she can become it. So I was like, yes, you are. You are supposed to be here, and tomorrow you're going to fake it, you're going to make yourself powerful, and, you know, you're going to... and you're going to go into the classroom, and you are going to give the best comment ever, you know? And she gave the best comment ever, and people turned around, they were like, oh my God, I didn't even notice her sitting there, you know? She comes back to me months later, and I realized that she had not just faked it till she made it, she had actually faked it till she became it. So she had changed. And so I want to say to you, don't fake it till you make it. Fake it till you become it. You know, it's not do it enough until you actually become it and internalize. The last thing I want to leave you with is this. Tiny tweaks can lead to big changes. So this is 2 minutes. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Before you go into the next stressful evaluative situation, for 2 minutes, try doing this in the elevator, in a bathroom stall, at your desk behind closed doors. That's what you want to do. Configure your brain to cope the best in that situation. Get your testosterone up, get your cortisol down. Don't leave that situation feeling like, oh, I didn't show them who I am. Leave that situation feeling like, oh, I really feel like I got to say who I am and show who I am. So I want to ask you first, you know, both to try power posing, and also I want to ask you to share this science, because this is simple. I don't have ego involved in this. Give it away. Like, share it with people, because the people who can use it the most are the ones with no resources and no technology and no status and no power. Give it to them, because they can do it in private. They need their bodies, privacy, and 2 minutes, and it can significantly change the outcomes of their life. Thank you.
What did you get from that? The fact that actually if you present yourself in a confident posture, that physiological change has a psychological change, and you will end up feeling more confident. So there are these exercises that you can do before you go to present, where you stand upright, where you practice, you know, your open, smooth body language, so that you exude confidence. It'll help you feel more confident in that space. So the last thing about that I want to say is that fluid gestures, these large, Fluid, open gestures exude confidence. Small, repeated, unnecessary gestures exude a lack of confidence. If you know that you're going to be nervous, put your hands in your pockets and stand upright, or put them by your side and stand upright. If you need to, you can hold on to a piece of paper or a palm card. Have a prop, but try to avoid these small little unnecessary movements. So let's really, really quickly recap. The content is important, but how you present is equally important. Entertain, have humour, have stories. Think about who your audience are. You know them. You know what they're interested in. You know what is likely to make them laugh. Bring some of that into it as well. Make sure that you practice and you rehearse so that you feel confident. The more you practice and the more you stand upright in a position of authority, will communicate that confidence, and the audience are going to watch and listen to you. And finally, think about your tone, pitch, pace, because those things tell the audience your meaning of your delivery. So good luck, enjoy your presentation. I look forward to watching them. Thanks very much.